Another thing I was going to ask you, and I'm sure you probably know what this is too, Mokele-Mbembe. What do you think of that?
Well, the classic explanation of what Mokele-Mbembe is probably a sauropod dinosaur, but some people find it hard to believe.
Is that kind of like a brontosaurus or something?
Yeah, but
like
it would be a smaller one, though.
Okay.
Well, yeah, absolutely, yeah. But the sauropods, they included like brontosaurus, apatosaurus,
Diplodocus.
Yeah. So
Brachiosaurus too. Wasn't he the aquatic one?
Brachiosaurus, yeah. Brachiosaurus was a sauropod.
Breathed through the top of his head. It was like the nose was on the top of his head. Very interesting. It was like a brontosaurus.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so you're talking about in the Congo, back in these swamps, the Lickawalla swamps that cover, they're like the size of two estates. And it's eat up with poisonous snakes and insects.
It's swampy.
Yeah. It's supposedly just an incredible pain in the butt just to even get back there to look for this thing.
Oh, wow.
But you've got missionaries that have gone over there to try to convert the natives that claim to have seen it on the edges of the swamps.
And so, very ill-tempered creature.
Yeah. And the stories have been going on for at least 100 years. You've got a history of stories about this supposed dinosaur back in the Congo. They claim to have found footprints, and there's been several expeditions back in there. I know a few people have actually been over there looking for it, and there's a big fruit that grows in a tree there called the Molombo plant, and they think that could conceivably be its food source. And the folklore around it says that it's very aggressive with crocodiles and hippos. That if a crocodile or a hippo goes into its
area
territory, that it will fight with it and run them out.
Oh, wow.
And it will supposedly defend itself against people, too. And there's a story, I don't know how much truth there is to it. Supposedly in the 1950s, some of these natives killed and ate one, and some of the people died from eating the meat. So,
yeah, they got sick.
I don't know.
And the Belgian soldier, there was a Belgian expedition. There was an expedition that went in. There were soldiers that supposedly were attacked.
But isn't it one of the recurring themes, though, that all these expeditions that have gone in there say that the local pygmy indigenous people, all of them talk about it like, yeah, it's out there. We've seen it. People have seen it all the time. I mean, that's my understanding.
Supposedly they show them different pictures of different animals, and they'll show them one of a sauropod dinosaur, and they say, Mokele-Mbembe.
Yeah, and they'll say that that's what it is. And supposedly it'll even kill elephants, too. Like, they say that it'll kill anything, like, that comes in its area.
Yeah, well, there's other theories about it besides it being a sauropod dinosaur. Some of the other ideas I've heard bandied about are that it could be a giant monitor lizard, something along the lines of Megalodon, the giant prehistoric relative of the Komodo dragon.
Which
is
got from about Australia, right?
It's from Australia, yeah. So there's some speculation that it could be a giant monitor lizard. Another idea is it could be a giant soft-shell turtle of some kind. You've got quite big soft-shell turtles that we know about from Africa that can get.
Well, I have a question on that one, Scott.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Well, you know, from what I've read and gathered about Mokele-Mbembe was that the natives, the local indigenous people, describe it as having a long neck. So how could that be any kind of a monitor lizard? Because it's got a long neck.
Some monitor lizards do have long necks. Look at Varanus salvador. It's got a very long neck.
Right.
So another idea that's been suggested is it could be mammalian. It could be a giant rhinoceros, because they know there were prehistoric rhinoceroses in Asia that got 18 feet tall, and they had long necks too.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. It's, what is it called? Indricotherium. Indricotherium. If you Google it, you'll see a picture of it. So that's possible too, but the classic explanation for what they think Mokele-Mbembe is some kind of sauropod dinosaur that's managed to hang on back in the swamps.
That's crazy how many species of animals have come and gone since we and like we are. It's unreal. It's just unreal, the life.
I mean, we're still finding new ones that lived millions of years ago that we didn't know about.
Well, there's an antelope they found in Vietnam, I believe, that has gills.
Was quite a few.
The View Quang ox. Yeah, I know about that.
Yeah, what is it? The other one.
That's so weird. Like, why would it have that, though? I mean,
it's an adaptation thing,
well,
I guess.
1976, they discovered a giant filter-feeding shark they didn't know about called the megamouth shark off Hawaii. It was completely unknown, so...
Well, according to Time magazine, I noticed, and this was about a year or so ago, I was going through the grocery store, and I noticed Time magazine of all the new animals discovered, and there was over 100 species that they'd done little clips on that had been discovered, and they ranged in size from something the size of a mouse all the way up to that particular antelope we're talking about in Vietnam. They had, and this is an annual thing that Time magazine does a piece on these animals that are discovered every year. So that leads us all the way back to all the forested areas, the places on land. When we stop and think, how much of all this territory that we have all over the world, how much of it has truly been explored? And the area where Mokele-Mbembe is located, that's the Congo. It's so dang hard to get back in there, like you said.
Right in the middle of Africa.
Yeah. You stop and think, okay, how many people on a daily basis actually try to get back in there into the deepest, darkest part of the Congo? And your answer is probably going to be, let's see, we get maybe one or two every 20 years, 30 years.
Well, what about the episode we did about lizards? We did one, we called it Lizard Potluck. You remember that one?
Oh yeah, gosh.
Yeah, and there was one of the story where the guy they saw that lizard. The story we got from him, I believe it was near Flagstaff, and it was killing and it was eating an elk. Like it was a giant lizard. I mean, it was a giant lizard.
There are reports from, and of course they get pushed back out to, I guess you could say, to the crazy section by some folks who see them, and then they fall off the radar. But I saw a video. It's been a while, but in this video, these people claim to have come across eggs, and that one or all three of them hatched, or one of them hatched. The whole point is that it was supposedly what came out of that egg was, it was like a little baby T-Rex, or like those little raptors you see in that movie.
That
Jurassic
was on Game
Park.
of Thrones, dude. You're talking about Game of Thrones. No. The three eggs and the dragons.
No. This is they found these people. That was the story.
Yeah, her name was Daenerys.
No, it's got nothing to do with Game of Thrones. But this is, and this was in Nevada, Utah area, up in those really arid areas that have a lot of mountainous terrain in that area. But this was the area, and you hear about a lot of these weird places. But of course, you hear these weird stories in these weird places.
There's an old newspaper account from the Yukon of these people claiming to see a theropod dinosaur along the lines of T-Rex. If you'll Google the Partridge Creek creature, it should take you to the information about it.
But a
lot of people think it's Partridge Creek creature. Yeah.
Okay, Partridge.
A lot of people think it's just a made-up newspaper hoax, but nobody knows for sure. So.
What about the Indiana? The one we got, I think, was Indiana, where the guy, it looked like a velociraptor ran across the road. Do you remember that, Sal?
Yeah, I remember that story.
Yeah, there was some. We get these weird stories of like I don't know what they are. I mean, flying dinosaurs, especially down in South Texas. There's always between Alice and Brownsville, like you get like pterodactyl. Thunderbird. Yeah, Thunderbird. Yeah,
you got mixed up in the Thunderbird thing. You have some that sound like these giant prehistoric vulture type birds called paratorns, and then you have some that sound like pterosaurs.
Do you believe that dinosaurs are still here? I mean, do you think that that's possible? Not
Possibly
just
in isolated populations, but they'd have to be really back in places that they can hide. I mean, I've actually been up to Canada, and there's parts of Canada you could hide a whole herd of dinosaurs out there and not even know it.
I believe it. I believe it.
I mean, you just drive on a highway for like 5 hours.
And that goes back to what I mentioned earlier about many people out there live under the assumption that we have covered every
inch of the
here
in
planet.
Texas,
yeah.
Lake Caddo.
I can tell you from personal experience driving across Quebec and Ontario. I mean, there's just you and a highway for miles and miles and miles out in the middle of nowhere. If car broke down, Bigfoot could come in and abduct you, and nobody know about it.
Yeah, and oddly enough, Scott, here in Texas, you start doing that on these smaller country roads, not the main interstates. Mm-hmm. You do this on these smaller country roads, like akin to what you've mentioned out in Quebec, Canada. That we get the same out here. Mm-hmm. We get the same out here, West Texas,
desolate,
and a lot of the central regions.
Or if you go to
Texas.
East Texas, near the thicket, dude.
Yeah,
if you're out in the big thicket, there's people that go hiking. A friend of mine's cousin, he was like, I knew the guy. He went to the thicket. What's it called? Sam Houston went to go. Yeah, he went to go hike, and he was never found. He just walked off into oblivion, dude. I mean, it just happens.
Yeah, it happens. It happens in places. How far are you guys from Texarkana?
Well, we're roughly
5 hours, 4.5.
I would say about 4.5 to 5 hours to Texarkana.
Well, you got the Falk Monster right there.
Falk Monster right there.
Yes, we do.
We sure do.
Legend of Boggy Creek.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? I know you're an aquatic cryptids guy, but what are your thoughts on Bigfoot?
Well, I love the movie. The original movie is great.
Me too.
So I don't know. I haven't been back there looking, but it has quite a history, and then apparently a lot of the real eyewitnesses were in the original movie playing themselves.
Yes.
So something's going on. If it's mass hysteria or if there's really some kind of creature or population of creatures back there. One thing I've noticed is that it seems like there seems to be a connection between the Falk Monster, the Missouri Monster, the what's the other one? The Honey Island Swamp Monster. They all seem to be in the same general vicinity, and they have a lot of things in common, like three-toed footprints. And I don't know, my only potential explanation of why there would be three-toed ones is possibly from inbreeding, because there's a tribe in Africa that have inbred, and they call them the ostrich foot people, and they have 2 toes on all their feet.
Just
because
2 toes?
Of a genetic defect, yeah.
Genetic inbreeding.
So,
yeah, okay.
Maybe you're dealing with something like that here too.
It could very well be. It could very well be.
The lizard man, if there's any validity to the lizard man has 3 toes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So there may be a connection there. I just don't know.
Right.
Scott, one of the things we talked about too. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, we were talking about your research at Lake Champlain. I mean, what do you think it is? I mean, we've heard all the different theories, and it's not.
According to what most people have described, it sounds like something along the lines of a plesiosaur. And I have thought that for many, many years about the Loch Ness Monster, but with all this new data coming from environmental DNA samples from the water of Loch Ness, they have found no reptilian DNA in Loch Ness. Therefore, that tells me that there can't be a resident population of plesiosaur-like reptiles in Loch Ness. Whether that extends to Lake Champlain, I don't know. But that doesn't rule out plesiosaurs coming and going up the River Ness and going back out to sea on occasion. If they're rarely visit, and there hadn't been any visiting the lake when they took their waters.
Well, Scott, you said that they actually give birth. You believe they gave birth to live young. That would make sense if they came up into that area to give their birth to the live young, and then they leave.
There's also the possibility they could be following. They could be following migratory fish like salmon that only come into the lake to spawn and then die, and that only happens once a year. They could be coming into fresh water to get rid of marine parasites that won't live in fresh water. They know that plesiosaurs could live in fresh water because there's abundant fossil evidence of them finding species of plesiosaurs that had lived exclusively in fresh water. And then there's evidence from up at Dinosaur Provincial Park in Alberta of ones coming from the sea swimming up rivers and then going back out. So not only were there types of plesiosaurs that actually lived their whole life in fresh water, but there is evidence that they could flip their osmotic regulatory system like a bull shark to be able to withstand freshwater and saltwater conditions without their body shutting down. Not every animal can do that, but a few can. You've got eels that can do this. You've got saltwater crocodiles can do this. You've got the bull sharks can do this. Eels, freshwater eels do this because they go back out to sea to spawn and die. And then the young come back to the fresh water once they're hatched.
Yeah, and we're talking about bull sharks. The Pondicherry, I think, is what it was called. It was
Pontchartrain. That's been around New Orleans.
Yeah,
like Pontchartrain.
Yeah, well, that's the body of water. It's like a lake where it's kind of brackish, but the
hardly salt water.
Yeah, the shark was called a Pondicherry, I believe, but it was supposedly it went extinct, and then they recently found one in Sri Lanka. But it was supposedly.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, it's called the Pondicherry, and it was and I'm just going off of memory here. I can't remember.
Well, they've called bull sharks in Illinois out of the Mississippi River.
Oh yeah, in Illinois. That's right.
They swim all the way up to Illinois.
That's so funny that people have argued with me vehemently that there's no sharks in the rivers, and I'm like, yes, there are, and they don't understand how these things work. They just do not get it.
There are freshwater stingrays in the rivers here in Florida.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Anywhere that life can live is they're gonna be. And then we were talking about the dolphins, pink dolphins. They actually exist. People, the color of cotton candy.
There are river dolphins which are strictly freshwater.
Amazon.
In the Amazon, they live in the Amazon. They live in the rivers in India. Where's the other one? China, Yangtze River has some
Yangtze.
too. Yeah.
And how did you? Let me ask you this. Now, you've been studying and researching for years, doing this. How did you first get attracted to and kind of settling on your particular niche? Because it's an important niche. There's a lot of people who overlook it, but it's because it's very important that people because like there are people that focus on Bigfoot and Dogman and these flying cryptids.
How many? I mean, you couldn't possibly count all the Bigfoot researchers out there right now. It's ridiculous. There's only a handful of people that do active work on water monsters
because it's a very prevalent thing. I mean, like, and to me, every time I get in the water, even if it's in the tub, I'm thinking, man, what the heck's I'm just kidding. Seriously though, I am like, I love the water and I love to swim.
Well, me too.
But I'm terrified of what's in it. I'm just terrified of it.
Well, you would think that since we have so much water all over the planet, we'd have more water researchers, but we have more Sasquatch / Bigfoot / Yeti researchers.
Well, it's sexier to do that. You know why the Bigfoot thing is more
in vogue?
Because it's more. They're like us. They have two legs and two arms. Whatever.
Yeah, they're humanoids.
They're humanoid. That's
part of what happened to me is 11 years old going to see Jaws.
Oh man, I'll tell you right now.
Blowed my cork. Between Jaws and the Loch Ness monster, that really put the hook in me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, all Jaws did for me is just what, Wolf mentioned a few seconds ago. Like, what could eat me out here? But when first time I saw I believe it was featured on that old show In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy. When the first Loch Ness monster thing was featured, that got me hooked because, but it was more from
awesome.
it was more from the perspective of, you go out on the boat, you don't go down diving after it because then you become lunch, But if you're out on the boat hoping to see it, or you find a vantage point up on the side of those mountains and stuff that overlooks, Loch Ness, you can sit out there and start scanning and see if you can find.
There wasn't a lot of shows back then when we were all young.
No.
There wasn't a lot of shows like that. I mean, like you didn't have it.
How old are you guys?
I'll just tell you this. I'm close to your age. I'm close to your age.
Okay, Scott's 55, and Sal, how old are you? You said you're close.
Hey, I just had a birthday not too long ago.
He's 72.
No.
Well, anyway, the point I'm getting at
I'm
is
your age, Scott.
When I grew up 40 years ago, I was at the right age. When Jaws came out, around the same time, there were a series of underwater photographs taken at Loch Ness that were all over the newspapers. The flipper pictures were taken a few years before that, but they were taken by the same group of people. There was one that looks like the front end of a plesiosaur. It looks like you see a neck and part of a body and two flippers. And there was another one that is supposedly could be the head of the Loch Ness monster. Now, some people think that a tree trunk that was retrieved from Loch Ness in 1987 may be the same object, but it's not 100% sure. But around the same time, a couple of months after Jaws came out, these underwater pictures were all over the newspapers. And it was a combination of that and Jaws that just really put the hook in me,
Yeah. Jaws got to me, but like I said, I separated the two between the Loch Ness monster and Jaws, because Jaws, I guess the element for me was it was like Jaws is a shark. We know about sharks. People, we see stuff about them all the time. So that factor didn't interest me. I guess it's the unknown factor is what gets me.
Are different from most other sharks.
No, they are.
I didn't know what a great white shark was until I saw Jaws. My idea was I had seen 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and seen the sharks in that, and I thought, well, that's what a shark's like. But a great white is like, it's the Godzilla of sharks.
Yes.
Of living.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott. They're warm-blooded too, right?
Yeah, partially warm-blooded.
Mm-hmm.
They're warm-blooded the same way that a leatherback turtle is.
Yep.
Okay.
And they can live in the cold water.
Yes, they're able to generate. They're not really warm-blooded, but they have a special arrangement of muscles and the way their blood circulates,
right,
that they're able to raise their body temperature above the surrounding water temperature and function in cold water like a warm-blooded animal, even though they're not fully warm-blooded.
I have
what you call, the term for it is bulk homeothermy.
Okay.
I have an important correlation with that. Now we know that Megalodon supposedly went extinct. Now, to me, one of the reasons why. Okay, let me go back and gather my thoughts. What I'm going to tell you or ask you, the Mokele-Mbembe. When they talk about that, it looks smaller than a brontosaurus. Now, it wasn't like the size of a brontosaurus, but it's big.
No,
but it could be
probably maybe in the neighborhood 20 feet long.
Mm-hmm. Like, what if it's like it's a descendant of that, not the same species, a variant of it? And when you see plesiosaurs, when they talk about them, there were different sizes, just like there were different sizes of mosasaurs, different species of mosasaur, but they were all mosasaurs. But
there was plesiosaurs as a group had all kinds. There were various different neck lengths. Some of them had necks that were 2/3 the length of their body, and other ones had short necks with really big heads. And there was a whole series of intermediate forms in between that. Some of them had different shaped bodies. Like if you look at their body from the tail end to the front, looking at it end on, some of them had triangular shaped bodies. Some of them had round bodies. There was a lot of variation, but the one thing they all had in common was they were propelled by 4 flippers through the water, almost like a double set of penguin wings. That's the one thing that all the different plesiosaurs had in common.
My question was, what do you think that okay, like you had the plesiosaur that seems to be smaller when we talk about them now. You're not talking about Predator X type creatures, okay?
Yeah.
And then and so you got like these smaller, with like the one in Galveston. Okay, let's just say that exists. Let's just say, for hypothetically, between me and you, it exists. The Mokele-Mbembe and the Loch Ness monster, they all exist, but they seem to be smaller than they were, and I think there's something to that, because
all flesh and blood animals go through juvenile stages.
Yeah.
Maybe they saw a juvenile.
Well, because I was going to say the Megalodon is gone, but its contemporaries that did exist at the same time, like the great white, the killer whale, they're still around. Killer whales were evolving to be what they are now at the time of the Megalodon, and they actually believe that great whites and killer whales sort of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, tag team the Megalodon. You know what I mean? Like
they outcompeted them. They fed on the same food source and outcompeted them.
Yeah, because
go ahead. Part of the reason they think that is that the Meg was so big, and one of the consequences of being so big is it had to eat so much food a day. And if it's being outcompeted by whales that are smarter with bigger brains and that hunt in teams, plus a smaller version of itself that doesn't need so much food, they may have driven it into extinction. And another thing that people don't think about is that they had to have areas to breed and to birth their young. And they may have been run out of those places too. And at the same time that the Meg goes extinct, there's a major extinction among whales, the whales that they fed on. That may have had an impact on them too. So it may have been a combination of a whole bunch of bad things happening all at once, and they just couldn't hang on,
Yeah, because I know, like on land, the megafauna, there were so many big, giant creatures roaming around, and they're all gone, like the giant sloth, the dire wolf, the smilodons.
Yeah, well, there's several different ideas about what killed off the Ice Age megafauna. One idea is what they call the Pleistocene overkill hypothesis. That Paleo-Indians came in from Asia across the Bering Land Bridge, and it just wiped them out, hunting them and eating them. But the problem with that is their descendants were the American Indians, and they didn't hunt the buffalo to extinction. We did.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense that they would have done that to the Pleistocene fauna and not done it to the buffaloes and all the other animals that lived on the plains during the Plains Indian period. So the other idea is that simply that when the ice melted, the temperatures got so hot that these animals that were used to living in cold and ice just couldn't adapt.
Yeah, because a lot of them, like the woolly rhinoceros, the woolly mammoth, they all went extinct. One of the things that I have heard stories, though, like in the area of the Taiga, that the Taiga region in Russia is very remote. And I got a story out of there. I read about some hunters actually seeing like a couple of woolly mammoths, like they were.
Well, the North American Indians have oral traditions about all of these extinct megafauna, mammoths and saber-toothed tigers, and there are things like Indian legends like the stone giants that were supposedly you throw a spear at them and their hide was impenetrable. Well, the giant ground sloth had dermal armor in their skin like that. That could be the origin of the stone giant stories. I don't know.
Yeah, and there were giant. I don't want to call them armadillos, but they were like, I can't remember the name of them. Glyptodons.
Yeah,
Glyptodons. That's right.
Yeah, some of them had spiked tails.
Yeah. They were very similar to the ankylosaur in the way that they had the tail and the armor but they were mammals, but they evolved completely separate, which shows that life kind of repeats itself in the way that it.
Yeah, it's like convergent evolution.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Well, because you see, like what everybody talks about the tiger, they call it the Australian. In my mind, I'm not.
Oh, the thylacine.
Yes, the thylacine, and so you know the way that creature evolved, and it's not related to cats or dogs at all, but it evolved. It's a marsupial. Yeah, but it evolved to eat and attack and kill other marsupials as like wombats, and it evolved.
It looks like a dog. It looks like a little dog with the tiger stripes on its butt.
It does, man. And now people are seeing those all the time. People are seeing those. Megalania, that's another one that's a
giant
reptile
lizard. Yeah,
lizard.
I was talking about that. Yeah.
Do you believe that
It got about 20 feet long. It was huge.
Do you think it could still be around, roaming around the outback?
Possibly. I wouldn't think it'd be afraid of people, though.
No.
But I don't know.
Because I know that the Aborigines have legends of them, and then having to burn them to kill them, like by burning the woods to kill them out.
Yeah.
To smoke them out.
If you're really interested in Australian cryptozoology, two people you should check out their work is Rex Gilroy, and the other guy is Gary Opit, O-P-I-T. There are a couple of really active Australian cryptozoologists.
Yeah, we had Simon Young on. He does Yowie research, and he was real big into and so that's I'll check out those other guys though. I mean, because anybody that I can make contact with that me and Sal, we always try to find people that we can because I love to research and I like to talk about it. And you're a very interesting guest, Scott. You got a lot of information, and you're very
thank you.
You're very up
I appreciate
on what you
having
do.
me on.
Yeah. Well, you definitely brought you brought the game because you were prepared too. I know that now people don't know this at home, but Scott, you're going all this off of memory because your computer crashed, right? And so
I've got some kind of a problem with these Windows 10 updates that is causing the battery in my computer to malfunction. And it shuts off and won't come back on for like 5, 6, 7 hours.
Oh my gosh!
It's plugged in. It says the battery is going dead. So I gotta next time it comes back up, I've got to figure out how to fix this.
Yeah, and the Tasmanian tiger. That's what I was trying to remember. It was it's because it's in Tasmania. Is a Tasmanian tiger? That's right.
Well, that's the same thing as the thylacine.
Yeah, the thylacine. Yeah, of course. I just couldn't remember what they called it.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with the tiger. It's just the stripes on it.
Well, there was an extinct marsupial saber-toothed tiger-like animal called Thylacoleo. And there's been some speculation about it, too, possibly surviving.
And where was that located at, though, Scott?
In Australia.
In Australia, yeah.
Somewhere in Australia, probably in the outback, I would imagine.
The outback, though.
There were even prehistoric carnivorous kangaroos.
Oh wow! I didn't know that. What? Tell me about that.
Imagine. Oh, I can't remember what it's called, but if you'll just Google carnivorous kangaroo, it should take you right to it. But imagine you've seen kangaroos box. Imagine this kangaroo grabs a hold of you and then starts kicking you with those feet. Well,
oh my gosh, that's terrifying. It's funny, but it would be terrifying if it happened to me, but it'd be funny if it happened to somebody else.
I wouldn't even imagine it, but I imagine that's probably the way this animal hunted and killed its prey.
And so when
we were talking about diet, there's evidence now that plesiosaurs ate birds too.
Oh wow!
Yeah, they've actually found plesiosaur bite marks on prehistoric water birds from the age of the dinosaurs. So they know maybe if these monsters like Nessie and Champ are plesiosaurs, they're feeding on water birds too, besides feeding on fish.
Well, I'm sure they'd eat anything. I mean, do you the deadliest seas? I mean, like I was reading something about like how horrible the ocean were. Because a lot of people don't realize this, that all of this in Texas, where we're from right now, it was an inland sea.
It was all underwater,
all underwater.
And you not only had plesiosaurs and mosasaurs, you had some nasty sharks that lived alongside them too.
Oh yeah. That's crazy. Like, and when you look at these creatures and you think, I'm so glad they're not around anymore. But then again, they might still be.
Better hope they're not.
That's the
And you
creepy
better hope
thing.
they're not in the water with them.
Yeah. Do you believe that though? Like as far as like your belief, do you believe that they're still around?
Yeah, but I can't prove it.
Yeah, I believe it too.
I suspect they are, but that's why I'm still going every year to do my field work to see if I can find something. What I've tried to do the last few years is concentrating on finding remains of a dead one somewhere on the bottom of the lake, underwater somewhere.
What do you think about this? I was given a story, and I saved it so when me and you could get on here and talk. And I was given a story, and one of the stories was there was a woman that said that she witnessed a plesiosaur, what looked like a plesiosaur, and this was off the coast of Florida, and they were like in not real deep water, and they were snorkeling. And she said that her and her husband and her 2 kids who were grown, they were grown up kids. They were like in their like late teens, early 20s. So these weren't like little kids. So they were witnesses to this. They saw what looked like a plesiosaur type animal, like and not in the distance. She said it was like a couple 100 yards, but they could make out what it was. You could see the long neck and everything. And they said that as it started to come toward them, like they didn't really panic at first, but as it got closer, they got a really good look at it. They began to book it for the shore, and where they were snorkeling was an area where you could walk for a long ways, in waist deep water. It didn't get any deeper, and I can't remember off the top of my head like where exactly that was, but it was somewhere near Florida, near the Keys, I believe. And they said that this creature came toward them, and it just like faded and like disappeared. Like it didn't go under the water and like swam, and then it just kind of came toward them, and then it just like disappeared. Like, okay, when we were talking earlier about the paranormal aspect of that, that's like, what is that? Like, was that a time slip? Like, in your mind, what would you think that would be?
I don't know. I tend to want to think that these things are just normal flesh and blood animals, but some people have other theories. Probably the most concrete thing I can point to regarding this idea. Do you listen to Coast AM quite a bit?
No, I don't. I did at one time. But my schedule now doesn't really permit it. But yeah, I have heard it.
They used to have a guy on there fairly regularly. A guy they called him Major Ed Dames.
Oh, Ed Dames. Yes, of course.
The
remote viewer.
Okay, exactly. Okay, well, according to Ed Dames, they were asked by President Clinton to look for the Loch Ness Monster. And in their remote viewing experiments, according to him, they kept seeing plesiosaur-like creatures, and they made drawings of them and everything, but they would fade in and out as they were viewing them. So their tentative theory was that the Loch Ness Monster was the ghost of a plesiosaur, was the way he explained it.
That would be weird, like, because a spirit
I'm
that would be that long.
This. I'm just relaying the information, like he said it. Have you ever seen a movie called The Men That Stare at Goats?
Oh, yes.
About remote viewing? Yep. Okay, the opening scene is based on what he was talking about. The very first scene in the movie is this guy talking about the ghost of the Loch Ness Monster. And that's what that's based on.
The remote viewing. Oh, I never made that connection.
And there's a book called Sci-Fi by a guy named Jim Mars, and he talks about it in that book.
Jim Mars, a legend. Definitely.
Well, there you go. Yeah, he's passed away now. But anyway, that's the most concrete story that I know related to this idea that it may be something supernatural. And then there's another idea that has been put forward about quartz deposits creating some kind of a black hole, and these things coming in and out of the prehistoric past through a wormhole of some sort.
Whoa.
Yeah. So there's another idea. So that could explain something appearing and then disappearing. So, but the science behind these ideas is very shaky, if there is any science behind them at all. These are just abstract ideas in search of science to carry the ideas. So, I don't know. But a ghost Loch Ness monster would fall into the purview of parapsychology. And there is some validity, I believe, to certain aspects of parapsychology. So,
absolutely.
So, you might want to call paranormal cryptozoology would better be classified as zooparapsychology, if you want to call it that. Apparitions that look like animals or ghosts of dead animals. I don't know. But,
well, I've got a ton of stories.
Like I said,
for that.
I don't endorse the idea, but I've got no proof that it's not the truth. I just find it very unlikely to be the truth.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, the simpler answer to me is that we're just dealing with flesh and blood animals that we haven't discovered yet that are very elusive. But I don't know,
Scott, much like the dog man, the whole werewolf thing, whatever, there's a debate if it's a werewolf, it's a skinwalker, it's a dog man, it's a flesh and blood, it's a spirit. I think the answer is all of the above. I think they all exist.
Well, I saw an interview with Linda Godfrey. I would imagine most people consider her to be the expert on the subject. And she said that even at this point, after researching it for 30 years, she doesn't have an answer. So, there you go. I don't know.
I've been after the truth for that for over 20 years, at least 20, however long it's been. I'm almost 45, so I'll be 45 next summer, so I'm 44. So, yeah, since I was 15, it's like 30 years, of just trying, but really, really hardcore researching it and trying to get stories about it and stuff for the last 20, 25 years. And getting a lot of information about those particular creatures, and because that's kind of my thing, was just to try to figure out what it was, And
well, even if they are supernatural creatures, hypothetically, even some people that endorse the paranormal explanation still believe that they can take a physical form when they manifest themselves and leave footprints and have a physical body. They're not just a mist or something. But, the problem with this whole thing is that, if you say they're flesh and blood animals, you still got to deal with the aspect of, well, they're not any recognized species that we know of. So, they could be a survivor of some kind of prehistoric species that's supposed to be extinct. You've got that hurdle to get over. But if you bring in the paranormal thing, you're adding an extra layer of, okay, we're not only questioning what we know about biology, but we're questioning what we know about physics as well. If you see what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not knocking it. I'm just telling you, why the scientific community has a problem with it, not only with flesh and blood cryptozoology, but with an added layer of paranormal on top of that. So.
I have no I don't discount any of that because I've gotten stories of these things. Man, I've gotten stories of these things like going from. I've never gotten a story from like a human changing into one of these creatures, but I did
a literal werewolf.
Yeah, a literal werewolf. But I have gotten stories of them going from being wolf-like into a man. And I got it from a guy that was a pest control, that he was there to do pest control, and there was a security guard, and they don't even know each other from Adam, and they both told me the same story. It was just weird. You get stories like that, and I've talked about it on the show, and then you get stories like
if you're dealing with some kind of spiritual, that's not flesh and blood. If these things exist, then they could take any number of forms, I would imagine,
Well, yeah, I guess it just depends if you're dealing with the spirit, of some sort of creature or whatever. And I don't discount like anything in the spirit realm because I know that ghosts, you're talking about animals. I've gotten lots of stories from people of animals being ghosts.
If you look in the history of parapsychology, there is a thing called an animal poltergeist. It's very rare, but, it's the ghost of an animal, supposedly. And sometimes they have been seen to change shapes into unrecognizable animals, allegedly, according to the stories in the lore, But, so,
you ever heard of the story of the mongoose that could talk?
Oh, Jeff, yes.
Yeah, Jeff. Yeah, I was gonna say that if you'd
that
ever heard of him.
happened around the same time as the Loch Ness monster was becoming famous.
That is so crazy. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it sounds like something very similar to the Bell Witch poltergeist case from Tennessee. So it's probably some kind of if there's any truth to it, probably some kind of a spirit, demon, something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wasn't there,
Yeah, because I know the Bell Witch, they actually claim to have seen like a hairy type creature that was seen in the cornfields and seen in this cave.
Yeah, it's really weird story. I believe that probably the Bell Witch was probably the inspiration for the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure, but it's very similar. So I think that's where they probably got the idea. But yeah, my main field of interest is this aquatic cryptid thing. But I also, tangentially follow developments in parapsychology and other fields of cryptozoology. And, it just, if you have even a slight, interest in any of this stuff, you always run into other people that are working on aspects of this other stuff too.
Mm-hmm. Because it's all relative.
So I pick up bits and pieces of it.
What are your thoughts on? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, no. Go ahead, Scott. Finish what you were saying.
I was going to say that my understanding of the best scientific evidence for parapsychology phenomenon is evidence of ESP. But you've also, on the fringes of that, you've got people that actively investigate ghosts and apparitions and all this other stuff too. So there must be at least some validity to all of it. A small hardcore of evidence, so I don't know.
Have you ever encountered you were doing a lot of research on Champ. You have studied the Loch Ness.
Well, I believe I had a Champ sighting back in 1994.
Absolutely want to get into that. Here's what I want to ask. Have you ever heard of any stories from people that are on ships, military, or submarines who pick up anything on sonar that's not normal? Something that you could say that could be something. Do you?
Well, one of my favorite sea serpent sightings happened in 1965 from a Navy submersible called the Alvin. They were going underwater in the Bahamas to inspect some underwater listing array for the government, which was down there to look for enemy subs and all that kind of stuff. And they went down and they saw this, what initially looked like a swimming telephone pole. And they watched it out the window, and it was only there for a minute, but it looked like a plesiosaur, and they watched it on sonar after it got out of visual range. And I spoke to the captain of the submersible, a guy named Marvin McCamus, on the phone back in the late 1990s and verified an account I had heard about this in a book. And I spoke to him and I sent him a bunch of material and he wrote me back and stuff. So that was, to me, probably beyond the Valhalla sea serpent. That's probably the most impressive sighting that I've ever heard of by somebody that was an experienced marine explorer.
Wow. That's crazy. And so that's a lot to take in. Okay, so you have been studying this for a long time, and you've been studying Champ for how many years?
Well, probably more or less 30 years. My first trip to Lake Champlain before I moved there was in November of 1992, so you could say I've been doing field research for 27 years. So.
Okay, so you tell us about the sighting that you had.
All right. April 1994, after I moved to, well, actually, no, this would have been about 3 months after I moved there. I moved there in April 1994, but my sighting happened in July of 1994, about 3 months after I moved there. I was sitting in this park that overlooks the lake called Battery Park in Burlington, Vermont, scanning the lake with binoculars. I had just spent all my money moving up there, so I didn't have a camera yet. So I was just basically getting on my feet. I got a job, and it was my day off, and I was watching the lake with binoculars. About 1,000 yards out from the park, out to the lake, I see this thing come up with like a big mound. I estimate to be about 15 feet long, a garbage bag color, a greeny black. In the middle of it, there's a smaller hump-looking object. Then it turns, and the smaller object is on the right end of this big mound. And it's swimming along, and it's moving up and down, bobbing along, then it stops and it sinks. So essentially, I think what I saw, this is hard to say, but I think what I saw was one of these champ animals swimming on its side with one of its flippers up in the air as it's bobbing along, and then it sank. It's possible it could have been a head, but it didn't have a long neck, but it had sort of a turtleish looking profile. So essentially, it looked kind of like a giant leatherback sea turtle, about 15 feet long. And this all happened in a matter of like 10 seconds and it was gone. But I was watching it through binoculars. That's the only thing unusual I've seen.
Do you think that that's what it is? A giant leatherback sea turtle?
No, but I think it probably has features kind of like a leatherback sea turtle. In other words, if it's a marine reptile, it has thermal adaptations to live in the cold water at Lake Champlain, which sometimes freezes over during the winter. It's got to have some kind of elevated metabolism to be able to stand the water temperatures if it's in there all the time.
And it wouldn't be a sea turtle because it's not in the sea, but you see what I'm saying.
Yeah. Last year, they found a dead leatherback sea turtle in a lake in Nova Scotia.
Whoa.
So, I don't know.
How did that happen?
Based on that, nobody knows how it happened. They think it swam into the lake and couldn't find its way back out and died for some reason. But it was a leatherback sea turtle, and they're the largest sea turtle species we know of so far. They can get 8 feet long. So,
do you think that
that really happened?
Is Lake Champlain connected to the ocean?
Yeah, in 2 places.
That's right.
Connected to the Hudson River and to the St. Lawrence River up north in Canada.
Oh, I knew the Hudson. I was going to say because I wanted to clarify that for the audience, but I didn't know the St. Lawrence. Well, I'm trying to think.
Yeah, actually, what is Lake Champlain now used to be part of an inland sea at the end of the Ice Age called the Champlain Sea, much larger body of water that mostly was up in Quebec and Ontario. And they have found remains of a beluga whale from that time period in Charlotte, Vermont, a whole skeleton. It's the Vermont State fossil, and they've also found seal bones on the New York side of the lake.
There's so many, because I know all of Canada was pretty much covered.
Yeah.
With water, and now there's lake, just
first
lake
it
after
was
lake
ice,
after lake.
and then all that ice melted, and the water had to go somewhere, and when it did, it flooded and connected these places with the sea, and it became salt water for a while.
I think Canada's just all water. Like if you try, there's like a lake after lake after lake.
I'd hate to have to count all the lake monsters reported from Canada. And there's so many lakes up there, it's ridiculous. And a good number of them have some kind of monster stories attached to them.
So the lake, I know that in Canada, I think I read somewhere that Canada has more lakes than any other country in the world. I believe that's correct.
There's a lot of them up there.
There's a ton of them. And so, yeah, I was like, that's funny whenever I think about that.
Part of Lake Champlain is in Canada.
Yeah.
You know that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the very top end of it is actually in Quebec.
Yeah.
It's 129 miles long.
God, it's big. That is huge. That is
400
unreal.
feet deep. You get out in the middle of it, it's like you're being out on the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
That's how Lake Superior is, too. I mean, like, you go any of those big,
Great
Great Lakes.
Superior makes Lake Champlain look like a mud hole. It's 1,000 feet deep.
It's just like a giant. It's like the ocean. I mean, it really is. It's just like the ocean. It's crazy because like all that at one time though was all connect from all the way from Canada all the way down through Mexico.
Yep.
It was all underwater
Mm-hmm.
at one time. It was like
that's in the time of the plesiosaurs. That was the Western Interior Seaway, they called it.
What are your thoughts on Predator X? Because everybody likes to hear about that, the Predator X thing.
Well, it was a giant short-necked plesiosaur that lived in Norway, I believe.
Yeah, they found two different specimens now, or at least pieces of them.
I think it got about 40 feet long, I believe.
Oh, it was because I heard that it was 130 feet long.
Oh no, none of them got that big.
Yeah, that's what I had heard. I like was the initial.
I don't know where you heard that, but no, they got probably about 40 feet long, I would imagine.
Oh my gosh, I thought it was much bigger than that.
Off the top of my head. No. Dinosaurs. Some dinosaurs got like 100, and I think maybe one of the biggest sauropods was like 170 feet long, about the size of a blue whale. But that was a land animal. But a 40-foot long giant plesiosaur with a 8-foot head would be scary enough without being 130 feet long.
Wow, because I remember watching some video, and I think I took my nephews to the IMAX, and we watched some show, and I kept falling asleep. I don't know, like twice.
Well, there's been a couple of them. There's Sea Monsters, a Prehistoric Adventure.
I think that's what.
And there's another one too, and I can't remember what it's called.
The Prehistoric Adventure part's what got me. Yeah, because
I think the other one I'm thinking of is called Sea Rex.
Yeah, I didn't see that one, but the other one.
Yeah, I've got both
familiar.
of them on video somewhere.
Yeah, because I got that DVD and I watched it twice in the theater, and I had sleep apnea real bad when I was overweight, and I fell asleep.
I've got when they first discovered Predator X, they had like a 2-hour long special about it on the Discovery Channel, and somewhere I've got that on video. But it was a scary animal. I mean, it was a scary animal regardless.
Was that now? What was the largest ocean-going predator that's ever lived that we know of?
I think it would probably be a mosasaur that was 55 feet long, maybe 60. And Basilosaurus, a whale, got 65, 70 feet long.
Would that mosasaur, would that be a contemporary of Megalodon?
No, supposedly the mosasaurs went extinct millions of years before Megalodon.
Before Megalodon, yeah.
Megalodon showed up, I think, around 20 million years ago. The mosasaurs were supposed to have gone extinct 65 million years ago, so you've got a gap of like 40 million years. But if you're talking about they may still survive out in the ocean, well, they'd have to be contemporaries. So, yeah. But that's depending on if they've survived beyond their extinction.
20 million years, that's a relative newcomer. I mean, when you look at the big scheme of things.
Yeah, it's, we're talking about just staggering gulfs of time. They think the Earth is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 billion years old. And the first multicellular life forms apparently show up around 500 million years ago. And then you've got a whole series of, you got the evolution of the first fish show up, and then you've got some of them coming on land to become amphibians, and then the reptiles and the mammals come out of that assemblage of amphibians. You had some scary prehistoric amphibians. You had this one named Prehistoric, got 30 feet long, like a giant crocodile, but it was a salamander, basically. So, yeah, you look at some of these prehistoric animals that lived before the dinosaurs are mind-boggling.
What do you think about the cephalopods? Like, I've heard over and over again that they are the smartest, if not in the ocean, but not, and just possibly on Earth. Like a very intelligent.
Supposed to be highly intelligent. I know they can train octopus to perform tricks, and octopus can figure out how to get out of tanks and do all kinds of things like that. And they're supposedly they think they can't hear, that their entire input is visual, and it's amazing how they can change the patterns on their skin to camouflage themselves and some of them are bioluminescent, can light up like an electric light, and they think they may communicate through making patterns on their skin, to communicate with each other visually.
Do you believe that they could be like the future, like what is left if mankind were to, let's say tomorrow mankind just was gone? Do you think cephalopods would fill the gap?
There's been some speculation about that in these speculative documentaries about what sort of animals would evolve if man went extinct. And some of them were land-going cephalopods. So I don't know. I mean, these are based on scientific speculation, so it's possible. I believe there are cephalopods are among probably the most abundant animals that there's probably types living in the deep ocean that we don't know about and we haven't found yet that would probably blow our mind beyond just the giant squid and the colossal squid. There's probably other ones, big ones out there that we don't know about that may be much weirder than the ones that we do know about.
Now, I saw a documentary once about the Kraken, and it was about the giant squid, and it was actually and they found like its lair, and it had actually been killing these ichthyosaurs, and it had
that's
been
Triassic Kraken out in Nevada. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, okay. So you know about that, and
yes.
Yeah. And so, do you want to talk about that? Explain that.
Well, I just was discovered these massive pile of ichthyosaur bones, like they had been arranged by something in a pattern. So the idea came. I mean, the ichthyosaurs we're talking about were the largest ones known, these shastosaurs, that got about, I think, 60 feet long.
That's a big animal.
So anything that would have been preying on them would have had to been a colossal animal of its own right.
I mean, it would have been the Kraken, the legendary Kraken.
So based on just initially the discovery of the bones, this paleontologist, Mark McMenamin, came up with the idea that it was some kind of a giant cephalopod that was preying on these ichthyosaurs and playing with their bones.
Wow.
Just based on that.
How long ago would that have been, Scott?
Oh, well, this would have been probably 250 million years ago.
Ooh, that's a long time.
Somewhere in that neighborhood, a long time ago. So anyway, in addition to that, he found something that looks like a giant beak. I don't know if you know about this, but octopus and squid have beaks that look like a parrot beak. Well, he found a fossilized something that looks like part of a giant beak. So this may be actual physical evidence for this animal. But it's highly controversial, so that's about all I know about it.
Yeah, because I know that some of the bones, they said that they had marks on them that were, it's just crazy. It just blows your mind. It's like, what, man, I don't know. And nowadays they'll find whales with marks on them from the suckers, because some of the suckers on the
skin,
they have little teeth on them. Like
some of these big squids actually have hooks inside their suckers.
Yeah, like
teeth.
They're almost like teeth
into their prey and hold on it not only with suction but with those hooks too.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
man, that is crazy. I mean, you are a wealth of knowledge, my friend. And it's cool that because a lot of this. Well, it's awesome to talk to you because, I mean, this is cool to me. We've been kicking this back and forth, folks, for a long time, me and Scott, but he's busy. I'm busy. He does a lot of research and he's on location. And we finally got to get this done. I mean, I've been really busy. I work a lot. But I am very, I read a lot about this kind of stuff. It's very fascinating to me. And you are just on point every time I bring up the subject.
Anytime you want to have me back on, by all means.
Heck yeah, dude. This is awesome. Yeah. So I appreciate you coming on, Scott, and talking about all the things. Yeah, man, there's just a wealth of knowledge and things that most people they just kind of overlook. But you are meticulous in your
I'm well grounded in the science, especially the paleontology under it. So that keeps me grounded.
Absolutely. And you this was all from memory too. Like everything, like folks, I didn't sit here and read off anything. Like this is stuff that I had researched, and Scott, you were on point with everything I threw out there. We didn't really pre-interview or anything. We just started talking, and you came on, and every story I brought up, you knew it, and that's pretty amazing. That's pretty cool. I really enjoyed you coming on, Scott. And we will definitely do it again.
And, yeah, absolutely.
All right, folks. Well, that's all the time we have with Scott Mardis. And, Scott, we appreciate you coming on. And thanks for talking to us and giving us all this amazing information. And we will definitely be in touch. And if anybody wants to go to your group and wants to participate, as long as you follow the group rules, Zombie Plesiosaur Society and Ghost Plesiosaur Society and
Lake Monster Skeptical Forum and Lake Champlain Monster Research by Scott Mardis, William Joganis.
Yep.
Is the other one.
Now, Scott, you need to write books. You got a lot of information.
I'm working on it. I already got one out, actually.
Yeah. What is it?
Night of the Living Dead Plesiosaurs. It's on Amazon.
Oh my gosh, I'll be going to get that. I didn't even know you had that. I'll be buying that tonight.
It's cheap too. It's digital. It's $7.
Heck yeah. All right. That's awesome. Yeah. Folks, Scott Mardis, everybody. And I appreciate you coming on.
All right. Have a good night.
You too, Scott.